So before this Constitution of Compromise could go into effect, it had to be ratified by at least 9 of the 13 states. So each state had a special convention where delegates could vote on whether or not to adopt the new Constitution. These conventions were more open to the public than the Constitutional Convention itself, and the ratification process is the reason why some people say the Constitution is based on the will of the people. But not everybody wanted the Constitution, and they needed convincing. This is where things get a little confusing. Did you want the Constitution? Did you? In 1787, public opinion about the Constitution was pretty evenly divided. Those who wanted the Constitution were called Federalists, largely because of the Federalist Papers, a series of articles written by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. They wrote the Federalist Papers to convince voters in New York to ratify the Constitution, and since New York did eventually ratify the document, I guess they worked. But we should listen to both sides of the argument in the Clone Zone. So joining us in the Clone Zone today will be Federalist Clone and Anti-Federalist Clone. Let's hear from Federalist Clone first. Fetty? Can I call you Fetty?
No. The Federalists were the incredibly intelligent Americans who thought that a strong central government would benefit the country as a whole. They tended to come from cities, and often they represented commercial classes, especially wealthy people who had lent money to the government during the Revolution. They liked the new Constitution because they felt that a strong national government would pay its debts, and this was good for business. They also tended to want stronger ties with England, again, because England was a good trading partner. Given the raging success of the Articles government, it's pretty clear that the Federalists were right.
Okay, now let's hear from Anti-Federalist Clone. How do you respond, Auntie? I'm not your aunt. Sure, Federalists were right to believe in tyranny. Anti-Federalists were right to be skeptical of a large government that would trample on our individual liberties. They didn't want a big government that would tax them to death and possibly take away their slaves. In general, Anti-Federalists felt that states would be the best protectors of people's rights and liberties because, being smaller, they would be more responsive to people's needs. Okay. The Anti-Federalists published pamphlets and articles too, but we weren't quite as organized, so we didn't have a coherent set of Anti-Federalist papers to push on government students. Okay, you seem really mad about this. I am. But you eventually lost the debate. I did.
Huzzah!
How come he got to shoot fireworks?
I didn't know he was going
I wanted to shoot fireworks.
I'm sorry. Next time, you can have fireworks.
So the Federalist position won out, and the Constitution was ratified, and that's the government that Americans have been living under ever since. Hooray! Because the Constitution was passed, we tend to think that everyone loved it, but it wasn't nearly as clear-cut as hindsight makes it appear. Eventually, the Federalists had to offer another compromise, promising a Bill of Rights in the first 10 amendments. This isn't called one of the constitutional compromises because it happened outside of the convention, but it was yet another example of how different interests had to give a little in order to get a constitution passed. It's very important to remember that compromise, the idea of balancing interests and giving a little to get a lot, is embedded in the Constitution. While today it seems like a political dirty word, compromise is the basis of the American government itself. Thanks for watching.